Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Jones of Sport for Life. I'm the Director of Community and International Engagement, and it's a real pleasure to join you today for the conference. I come to you today from Vancouver, Canada, and as you can see from the background, I'm a big supporter of the Canadian teams at the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and I hope you're enjoying watching those games as well. Today's presentation is about physical literacy, and I'll just switch quickly to a brief PowerPoint that I'll walk through with you to illustrate a few ideas, and we can then do a question and answer towards the end. As you can see, today's presentation is about physical literacy and its ability to bring everyone to the table. I want to first gratefully acknowledge that I am coming to you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Indigenous Nations, where I'm presenting from today. You've probably heard a lot about physical literacy during this conference. I won't go into big details about definitions or specific concepts. I'm more interested in the application side of that. But I will just say that physical literacy truly is a lifelong journey. It's a shared responsibility amongst the entire community. And I'd like to give an example of how it can be delivered by and in the community. Where everybody can participate and everybody can be involved. So if that's okay, let's get going. A little about Sport for Life. At Sport for Life, our mission really is to develop physical literacy and improve the quality of sport. We do that both here in Canada and around the world. And we do so by sharing and mobilizing knowledge, which is just a very helpful way for all of our partners to help develop and move along that pathway of their own journeys as well. We strive to develop physical literacy, and as you can see from the wheel, it is about physical competence, confidence, and motivation. We also strive to develop quality sport. Things like developmentally appropriate, having safe, inclusive sport, having well-run programs. So really good places, good people, and good programs is kind of how we've phrased it. And we've been working towards that, of course, but we're, like, and many of you, faced with a similar problem, and it's something that, when phrased this way, it kind of makes people stand up and pay attention. That is that the generation that is currently being raised now is at risk of having a shorter life than their parents. In other words, living shorter lives than we do. And if we don't act now, there are some real issues that will come up. And as you can see, so it's about poor quality of health in the culture, poor quality of physical health, intellectual, social health, social well-being, emotional well-being, and certainly what we see more and more often, both in high-performance sport and right the way through the sports system and through the recreation system and through all of society, is the quality of mental health and the concerns that come when it isn't a positive thing. So that is a real problem, and we want to sort of look at a little bit of reasons why those things happen. And as you can see from the slide, unstructured play, as we call it, and when we were kids, is basically extinct. It's usually overprogrammed, overorganized, and kids often don't feel like going. So the unstructured loose play that was there in the past is very hard to find these days. Playgrounds are empty. You might have the most sophisticated, fun-looking equipment, but kids are doing other things. No more come home when the streetlights come on, as you may recall. I know I did when I was a kid. Or your mom and dad would whistle and come back, and that's just not happening as much. And people are walking to school. It could be safety in the community. It could be concerns. It could be lack of time with their parents. But most kids are driven to school. So that cuts down on the amount of opportunities they have to be with friends or to burn off calories and just generally be healthy. They don't have as much the chance to develop those things you see on the screen: body control, which are things like agility, balance, coordination, the locomotion activities of running, jumping, and swimming, or the ability to manipulate an object control, whether it's a ball or it's a badminton shuttle, those sorts of things. It's less and less, they're less and less able to develop those abilities, which of course is a concern. So it's a tough side to see here, but basically physical literacy is not treated the same in schools as things like literacy and numeracy. And, and we really do believe that it should be. It is very much a building block of a kid's development, and should be on the par with those other activities. So there you go. Learning to move is just as important as learning to read and write. And that's something that I believe everybody at this conference shares, but I just wanted to put that up on the screen to remind all of us. So how does it develop? Well, we know that for a child of any kind, it takes, beyond their parents, their friends, it takes the entire community to raise a physically, socially, intellectually, mentally, and emotionally healthy child. And that's just a basic concept, the premise that we go in into when we start to think about how to develop physical literacy in the community. So a solution that we believe is important, and that we've been working on the last 5 to 8 years, is an initiative called Physical Literacy for Communities. And I want to speak to you today about that. It is a program that we've developed in the province of British Columbia, here on the west coast of Canada. And it involves a range of sectors. It involves all kinds of folks at all ages. And it's something that we believe is really assisting in developing physical literacy in this province and across the country. So I'll go into some more detail now and talk about a practical example of raising the level of physical literacy in the community. This particular initiative has a 3-phase commitment. It has the phase of education, so facilitating an understanding and awareness of what PL is, or physical literacy. Training primarily leaders in order for them to then train other leaders, teachers, instructors who can then train children or train adults, depending on the audience, which is basically about developing physical literacy enriched program, And then lastly, sustaining that. How do you maintain those things that you've initiated into the community in order for them to stay and for them to last? So 3-phase: educate, train, and sustain. The way we do that is that we engage with 4 main sectors: recreation, education, health, sport, the sport community, and then an aspect of communications and media in order to get the message out. But those are the 4 to 5 main sectors that engage in this 3-phase project. Let me talk to you a little bit now about the initiative here in British Columbia. So when you see BC, the word BC, you'll recognize it as British Columbia. On the right-hand side, that's the extent of BC here on the west coast. It involves the north, it involves the border in the south with the US. On the east side is the province of Alberta, and then you'll see an island out on the left there, Vancouver Island. This particular project is unique because it was funded by the BC Ministry of Health, not the Ministry of Sport, Ministry of Education. This is an initiative to improve health, because they've made the connection that physical literacy can help improve the health of individuals, which reduces healthcare costs. So they made that connection, and they put an amount of $1.1 million into it over a range of time. We've chosen a number of communities, 20 plus communities, and there is an amount of funding available to them of up to $50,000 per project. So 26 communities across 5 health authorities. We're split into those different health authorities, and each project is on the order of about 2 to 3 years. So it ends up to be quite a broad range initiative across the entire province. Now, how do we do that? How do we choose communities? Well, communities need to be eligible, and what we deem as an eligible community on the left-hand side is either a health authority, it could be a school district, a post-secondary institution, it could be an Indigenous band council, it could be a regional sports center. We try and avoid anything that's in terms of a government connection, a religious group, or a specific agency that might consider this to be a program. This is not about creating a program. It is more about creating the atmosphere for people to understand physical literacy, and for them then to be able to communicate and practice it in the community. So it's really training leaders, changing behavior, actually. And so we try and choose under those eligible communities. How do we choose the communities themselves? Well, the agency applying within the community has to be a charitable or nonprofit organization, and we try and choose smaller communities. So under the the number of 190,000 residents in order for it to be small enough for people to know each other and for them then to be able to collaborate and interact effectively. The selection criteria that we use to then choose from those eligible communities is trying to find balanced regional and community representation. We are looking for communities that are actually ready. They've delved into physical literacy before. They start to know each other, and that they've shown an interest and a bit of a track record in this as well. It's a mentorship approach. So we are really using mentors in the community and Sport for Life trained mentors as well to go into the community to train people. We benchmark against a creation of a community plan. And we then have created a whole package that the communities can choose from in the way of e-learning, in the ways of workshops, in-person meetings, webinars. And basically, again, we are training trainers in order that that capacity can stay in the community. So roles of mentors and associate mentors. Typically, mentors are trained and selected by Sport for Life. The associate mentor is somebody in the community. So it could be somebody in the very north of the province, which might be an hour or 2 hour flight from down here on the coast. Could be on the east side, which is more remote, could be a smaller community. So it needs to be somebody or some people in the community who know others who can then get that critical mass to reach out to the various sectors: health, education, recreation, and sport. The role of the mentors themselves really is one of facilitation. They are not imposing or creating a template in the community. They are actually facilitating discussion, making introductions, and helping people collaborate amongst themselves to come up with a plan to develop physical literacy in the community. Every community is different, so we need to be very, very mindful of that, very respectful. We do provide some leadership, but really it's a facilitation role. We are there to provide mentorship, advice or experience shared from other programs. We started this program about 5 years ago, and it is now up and running both in BC and across the country. There's also an aspect of accountability in having a mentor involved in it, because there's reporting back to our funding agency, the Ministry of Health, as well as accountability back to leadership within the community itself. So mentors are very important here. Just a quick slide here on that phase 1, which is educate. And this is about, as you can see, steps 1 through 5. We're signing a community mentor or consultant. We're talking about becoming a physically literate community. We're doing that through creation of a community plan that's built and developed by the community itself, and then promoting it and getting people to the table from each of those sectors who can then speak knowledgeably about what's happening in their sector. And there may be more emphasis from one sector to the other as we go from community to community, but it's then about educating within the community from there. So once the community has started this process and started to see results, how do they sustain that? And here's an example just of, on the left there under opportunities, you can see that the communities can then go into their community foundations. They can go back to different sport ministries or the health ministry. They can be involved in the Indigenous sport world, or they can invest in themselves through local sponsorship, and it may be public or private funds that come into it, and maybe through, on the right-hand side, community grants under TELUS, which is a big phone company here. It might be Jumpstart, which is under one of the larger department stores here, or it could be the Doctors of BC, which is the BC Medical Association, investing back into themselves. So how to sustain? There's lots of ideas, and those ideas come up as more and more discussions happen at that table. What happens often is that the community itself will brand themselves as a physical literacy community. And for example, in West Vancouver, Bowen Island, which is right here in Vancouver, they've created a thing called Play West Van and Bowen Island. So they then have some ownership, and it becomes a branding exercise for them to promote the physical literacy activities. So physical literacy in the development of it involves the entire community, where everybody has a seat at the table. In other words, as the session suggests, that there's a seat at the table for everybody. Collaboration is absolutely key, and we really believe that more voices and perspectives make for better outcomes. And those outcomes then are sustained through broad and more engaged community involvement, and then such that it becomes local ownership, which is the key to keeping this entire process going. So I hope this has been instructive and helpful. It is one way of developing physical literacy, and it is a very community-based one. I'm sure there's many, many other ways, but I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you've enjoyed our time together. It's been great having a chance to interact with all of you, and I look forward now at your when you get a chance to participate in some questions and answers. So with that, I will leave you and thank you very much for your attention.